Welcome to Women in the Music Industry, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in an industry that has long been dominated by men. I'm your host, Rob Wells, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering journey. Each episode of this podcast will be dedicated to exploring the inspiring stories, accomplishments, and struggles of the extraordinary women who have defied the odds and made waves in the music business. Together, we'll delve into the journeys of female artists, songwriters, producers, musicians, managers, executives, and all those who have helped play a pivotal role behind the scenes. We'll uncover the stories that deserve to be heard, as well as celebrate the triumphs, challenges, and unique perspectives that women bring to the music industry. Whether you're a fan of music, an aspiring artist, or simply curious about the inner workings of the music business, this podcast will offer a valuable perspective. Together, we'll celebrate the power of music and the strength of these inspiring women. So join us as we amplify their voices and together pave the way for a future where women in the music business are no longer the exception, but the rule. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Songwriter's Piano, an easy-to-use app for songwriters and lyricists to use when coming up with song ideas when there's no instrument around or nobody to play one. With the Songwriter's Piano, one can easily play commonly used pop songwriting chord sequences at the touch of a screen, in any key, in 3 different chord variations, all played on a gorgeously recorded grand piano. Download the Songwriter's Piano by Play Like Me apps today, found on both iOS and Android stores everywhere. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Women in the Music Industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the podcast. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. My guest today is none other than New England fiddler and folksinger, Lissa Schneckenburger. Over the last several decades, Lissa has made music that has showcased everything from traditional New England dance tunes to original songs inspired by her experience as a foster and adoptive parent. That is awesome. I want to hear all about that. To date, she has released 12 albums worldwide. Her latest album, Falling Forward, has blended her love of traditional music with her love of writing in her first fiddle forward album in over a decade. Raised in a small town in Maine, Schneckenburger grew up with music. She began playing fiddle at the age of 6, inspired by her parents' interest in folk music. In 2001, she graduated from the New England Conservatory of Music with a degree in Contemporary Improvisation. She has been writing, performing, and teaching music around the world ever since, and we are so happy and honored to have you here, Lissa Schneckenburger. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
My absolute pleasure. This is great. We have just met within the last 10 minutes and just sort of been caught up, but I'm so curious to hear about your journey, the path that you have taken, your musical upbringing, all of this, what led you to go down this road. I'm all ears, and I love this. As I said to you just about 5 minutes ago, I'm that annoying person that sits on the airplane and inevitably starts up a conversation just because I am so curious in people, and you learn so much about people, and then you also realize how much we're all connected when you open up and have a nice conversation. For those that are wanting that conversation,
you're in good company. I'm that person too.
Awesome.
So, in a perfect world, we get to interview each other. Yeah. Get to know all kinds of things. Yeah,
we can do that down the road, I'm sure, at some point. That'd be all right. So why don't we start right back at the beginning, if that's all right with you? I'd love to hear. We sort of got a taste of this just reading your bio here, but I'd love to know more. Like your parents loved folk music, and they must have been playing a lot of that as you were growing up. My parents as well, they loved folk music, and it was pretty much a nonstop folk music or classical music environment in the home that I was growing up in. But I'll just let you take it away and just let me know sort of like the first music that you ever heard, and take me all the way to where you are today, please.
Of course. Oh my gosh. Well, my parents are great folk, just music fans in general. And I I felt very, very well supported, very privileged and lucky to have had a family that supported me creatively from the get-go. And so, we had lots of albums. I was listening to LPs as a kid and listening, going through my parents' record collection, and then going out to concerts and all kinds of just amazing, enriching things. I feel very, very lucky to have had those opportunities as a kid. My mom's best friend from college is also a fiddle player and a singer. And I had been actually asking my mom as a kid, as a small child, I'd been asking her for a fiddle or a violin for a long time. And I think I was like 4 or 5, and she didn't quite take me seriously. And I think we were also broke at the time, so she kind of put it off for a little while. And finally, when I was 6, my mom's best friend was visiting for the summer on vacation, and we took that opportunity to go and rent me my first fiddle.
Wow.
And I got my first lesson, or few lessons, while her friend was visiting, Carol Thomas Downing, who is still a musician to this day. She does she's a choral director. She actually started the Virginia Children's Choir, and is an unbelievable musician and teacher for decades. Anyway, she gave me my very first fiddle lessons, and I was just so excited about it. And then I grew up in Maine, and my mom went out and found me a fiddle teacher after her friend went home. And sort of from there, we were very, very lucky. We found a teacher in Lewiston, Maine, who is still teaching music to this day. Greg Boardman. He actually teaches in the public school district. Now he does the strings programs for elementary school kids.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
He was my fiddle teacher, and it was such a wonderful connection. Not only did he gave my brother and I both fiddle lessons, but even almost more importantly, he really connected us to this phenomenal, music and dance community in Maine. It's still to this day, very rich, vibrant, full music community. Lots of folk dances happening, contra dances, and lots of concerts and festivals and fiddle contests. And so we ended up getting just like sucked into that. And I loved it so much. And that was really, honestly, what kept me, it kept me interested in music long term, was having the social element. I love music, but I love musical connection with other humans. So, as a kid, my family was going to the local weekly or monthly dance, and my fiddle teacher would be up on stage, and anybody could sit in the back of the stage. It was very loose, very open and accommodating to all different kinds of musicians and folks of all levels. So I spent a lot of time, dancing, running around with other kids at folk events and festivals, and sitting in the back of all the different bands and like learning music, just kind of playing along. I'm going to turn off that thing so it doesn't ding at us forever.
That's all right. I once forgot to turn off my phone in a live performance. And we were playing this ballad, and suddenly my phone got a message, and the ding on the Apple iPhone happened exactly right on the beginning of the bar, and it was in the right key. So it sounded like this nice accent that just came right in, and everybody just turned around and cracked the whole band up. It was so great.
That's special. That does not always happen.
No, it doesn't.
That is special. Yeah. So anyway, Maine has an amazing, rich fiddle and folk music community, and I was really lucky to be part of it. And I had, through all of the different friends that we met throughout all of the fiddle contests and festivals and dances and concerts, a lot of those connections, they're still with me. They're still friends that I have today. And I still go back to Maine, even though I don't live there anymore. I still go back regularly and perform and teach, and am part of the Maine Fiddle Camp, which my teacher started years ago. So that was a really rich, fun way to get into music. And then through that community, I ended up meeting more and more and more musicians from farther flung areas. And one of my other big musical mentors was a fiddler named David Kaner from Massachusetts, who he was a dance teacher and community organizer and musician, fiddle player. And I met him as a teenager, and he actually started hiring me for my first tours and gigs. And we played a lot of music together, and I learned so much from him about community and fiddling and music and harmony and how to show up at a gig, like all of those things. He was a wonderful mentor and kept me connected to the social aspect of music for sure. And then my third real major influence as a musician as a kid was Alistair Fraser, who is a Scottish fiddle player, who, I got his album as a kid and learned the whole thing cover to cover and was obsessed with his music, loved it so much. And then as a teenager, my dad and my brother and I went out to his fiddle camp in California. Alistair Fraser has a Scottish fiddling school, which is a week-long immersive experience where you learn from all your favorite fiddle heroes, and you go to jam sessions and concerts, and you just kind of immerse yourself in music for this period of time.
That sounds epic. Sounds like such a great camp.
It's really epic. And for listeners that aren't already aware of this, there is this whole phenomenon now of fiddle camps that happen, fiddle and music and folk music and dance camps, that it'll be it's like camp for adults mostly, although often they're all ages and there's families that go. But you go and you do this thing that you love with all the other people that love it for a whole week, and you just have a great time. It's super, super fun. So Alistair's camp was the first one that I went to as a young teenager. And I met, through that camp, I met some of my dear, dear friends, other kids my age who were excited about Scottish fiddling. And that felt pretty special. Growing up, it wasn't, I was aware even as a teenager that was special, and that my neighbors in my rural Maine town didn't all love or even know about Scottish fiddle music.
Right.
So it was really cool to go to this camp and meet a bunch of people that knew, not only were excited about Scottish fiddling, but they knew all the same tunes as I did. They could reference all the same albums. We had inside jokes. It was a whole thing. It was really cool. And then I became pen pals with many of them throughout the year, and we'd go back to this camp over and over and over again. So Alistair Fraser is another big, major musical and social influence in my life. And sort of the thing that ties all of it together is definitely fiddle music and folk music, but also community. All of the people that I've been excited about and learned from over the years have really prioritized, human connection and supporting each other. And that has been a really important theme, I think, through my life.
Incredible. Okay, I'm going to ask a really stupid question.
Okay.
A silly question. Is there a difference between fiddle and violin, or is it just in the way that you play it?
I'm so glad you asked, because everyone wants to know this. Everybody asks. And in fact, so many people ask. I put a whole thing on my website about it. There is no technical difference between the instrument. It's just terminology. Fiddle is more of a slang term. Violin is the official, derived from the Italian. Actually, the fiddle is also derived from Italian, but regardless, I have a more cerebral explanation on my website, but then on social media, I really enjoy making jokes about it. There's so many jokes.
Right.
They go on and on. A violin has strings, a fiddle has strings.
So good.
There's a lot of jokes about what you drink or spill on the instrument, depending on what it's called.
Right. I have many accordion jokes. I love to play the accordion, but it's it's the butt of many jokes. But are there certain? Just curious. I know that violins are obviously made in various different locations in the world. Are there some that lend themselves better to the sound of fiddle music, or?
I mean, yes and no. I would say no, but it depends on who you ask. Certain fiddlers do appreciate certain adjustments to the instrument, but really technically it can be the same instrument. You can play a concerto, you can play a Mozart concerto and also a Appalachian fiddle tune on the exact same instrument with no adjustments whatsoever. It's totally just how you play it. There are really different techniques. So different musicians, depending on their style, their preference for what music they play, and depending on their background and how they've studied, they might use really different physical techniques to create different sounds that come out of the instrument, but it is still technically the same instrument.
Okay.
Yep. And so, yeah, certain fiddlers might prefer certain strings over a classical player, or maybe certain different rosin, or maybe the bridge. Some fiddlers will maybe go as far as like preferring a more flat bridge, but those are really nitpicky details that most people don't care about.
Right.
Like I don't care. I love my regular bridge. It's great. Works great for all kinds of things.
Amazing. I love, so in Canada, the East Coast is very much into fiddle music like crazy, like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, all of these areas, which is really close to Maine. Like basically Maine and Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, they join up together. So I imagine that is just like all the descendants that came through that area and then just started that traditional music, dude, just carrying it forward from Scotland, from Ireland, from England, all of that just coming right through. But yours is specifically, do you focus on Scottish style of fiddle music, or does it move around? Is there a difference between Scottish and Irish fiddle music? Is in the way that you play, the voicings, the melodies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is. The correct answer is yes. Okay. All of the things. Yes to all the things you just said. I was just joking with a friend recently, like when you first start out listening to fiddle music, it all sounds the same. And it's just like a blur of fast notes. And you're just like, whoa, what is even happening? I don't even know what I'm hearing right now. It goes by really fast, and there's lots of tiny little densely packed details, and you're just like, whoa, it all sounds the same. And then you get into it a little bit more, you spend some years listening and more maybe playing a kind of music, and you start to notice there's like huge differences, like in between, not, between different tunes and different kinds of repertoire, but also between genres. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a difference in sound between Irish and Scottish music and New England. And as you suggested, there's a huge connection between maritime Canada and music in New England and Maine. And I was very excited about all of those connections over, decades. I was really immersed in studying and listening to a lot of old recordings and being part of that still vibrant community.
Oh, for sure. And even when you travel further south from New England, it would change too. When you get into the middle of the eastern section of America, you'd get a whole bunch of different styles of fiddle music. And then even when you get down into places like Louisiana, I'm sure like it just like completely changes all completely. Yeah. And it's so similar to language. Language is a really great metaphor because traditional music is most typically an oral tradition. It's not learned from notes or on the page. It's learned from person to person listening, or now these days maybe on YouTube. But you're still listening and learning from specific people, and those regional accents are still pretty strong even today in the modern world. And so, you have, there is a fiddle accent that is encompassed with, like, say, northern New England and maritime Canada. And then, as you suggested, there's a very strong, different fiddle accent in, completely different genre. When you go down south, go down to Louisiana, or, there are all kinds of places you can go, and the accent or the fiddle style will vary, and it can be subtle. It can be from one person to the next, and it can be from one area to the next, or one group of friends to the next. Like if you have a
if you have a jam you go to every week, that will develop as its own little micro
True.
tune ecosystem. You'll have your favorite repertoire, your favorite ways you play together, and that just expands out with the people that you're connected to.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
But to answer your question, I do play a lot of Scottish music. I love it. I've loved it since I got obsessed with Alistair as a kid. And I also, my first sort of musical language was New England fiddling, which I got from my other mentors, from Greg Boardman and David Kaner, and also through, post-college, just lots and lots of research and listening and playing gigs in the area.
You're going from performance, and then I know that you have 12 albums that you've released. When did that transition into, I now want to go from performance to actually recording some things, some things down? Were you recording original songs at first, or were you recording cover songs that already existed, or I'll just let you take over from there?
Yeah, of course. I've always been interested in recording from almost the get-go. So when I was in high school, I went to freshman year of high school. I was like a 15-year-old going to public school, and I was in chorus and all the music classes I could take, but it still wasn't enough for me. I was like, I really, really want to do more music. And I applied to a few performing arts schools, but I didn't get enough scholarship money to go to any of them. So what I did instead was I quit school. I quit school, and then I just did a bunch of music instead. I did a lot of traveling. I started playing gigs. I was in a touring ensemble. I went to Russia, and I started taking classes at the community college locally and the University of Maine. Where I'm going with this is there was an audio engineering class at the University of Maine that I took. I don't know, I was 16 or something. And that was my first experience. It was in the 90s. So we were like splicing tape. And that was like the first and last time I ever had to splice tape.
Right.
But I was super excited about it, just really interested in the whole process, the engineering from start to finish, the writing, the recording, the engineering, the mixing, the post-production, like all of it. How does it start and where does it end up? So I was really excited to learn about it as a teenager. And then I actually ended up making my first solo album, which doesn't exist anymore, but my first solo album was in 1997. I would have been in high school if I had gone to high school. And it actually ended up becoming my audition for college, for conservatory. So I made like a full-length album at the end of my high school career, in quotes, and then went to New England Conservatory, and ended up doing the same thing at the end of my conservatory experience. After 4 years of music school, I had, going into music school, I had a bunch of transfer credits because I'd been taking college classes during high school. So my last year of conservatory, I really didn't have any classes left to take, except for I was still doing like studio and working on my senior recital. And so I made another album. That was my second solo album, which is also not really available anymore for people. But those were like really important learning experiences. And I still to this day love recording. I like the process of it. I love writing, I love composing, and I love editing, and I love just the process of going in and polishing something as, to the best of your ability is really pleasurable for me. It feels really exciting to have this thing that you work on really hard over a long period of time that you really attempt at least to perfect and then put out in the world to share with people.
Oh, it's a completely different animal, isn't it? Like making an album is kind of like if you're used to acting on stage in theater and then you go to make a movie. It's a completely different thing where it's very personal and just you can craft so much more in an element like that, in an arena like that, where you can create your own album and create the atmospherics and create, the dynamics and everything. That's entirely different than performing on stage.
Yeah.
Different
for sure. It's a lot more. I mean, it feels more thoughtful and slow, which I appreciate. And I love live performance too. Not to say that that's not thoughtful. It's just it's just totally different different thing. But to answer your question, originally, those first two albums was, I'd say, primarily mostly traditional repertoire. So tunes that I learned through the fiddle community that were, there's a lot of repertoire that we call it traditional repertoire. And what that means is it's so old that no one knows who wrote it anymore.
Wow.
It's in the public domain, beyond the public domain. And then within that tradition, then there's other newer tunes, like you might learn a friend's tune that they wrote, or a friend of a friend might teach you something that somebody wrote more recently, and that's kind of integrated into part of it. So that was mostly what I was recording on those first couple of albums. But I was also already writing music. So on both of those albums, I had I think on the first one, a couple of original instrumental tunes that I wrote. And then the second album, I had both in some original tunes and also a song that I wrote with lyrics. So, so writing has always been part of my life also, even though I was being mostly inspired in those years by the traditional music community of older repertoire.
I see. And when you say original songs, were these just purely instrumental songs, or did you ever have lyrics? Did you ever have vocal that was being recorded as well?
Yeah, both. So when in the traditional music community, usually the terms mean, if you say it's a tune, it means it's instrumental, no lyrics. And if you say it's a song, it's got vocals. There are lyrics usually, and a singing component. And so I was interested in both from an early age. Although I feel like I got a lot more serious about the songwriting, lyric writing, and singing after college.
I see. Can I ask, just, you went to the New England Conservatory of Music. Was there a fiddle program in there, or did they make you start learning other styles of music and playing other styles of music? Like, was it full-blown classical? Was it jazz? What was happening in your world there?
That is such a good question, again, because everybody wants to know. It's like a common question. So New England Conservatory was actually the first conservatory to start a non-classical program back in the 60s. They started a jazz. Gunther Schuller is this amazing composer and conductor who started he was the president of NEC for a period of time, and he started the jazz studies program there. And he also, at the same time, he started a program called the Third Stream program, which he had this idea that there was going to be this new genre of music that was going to combine the extended harmonics of like a lot of the extended modern aesthetics of classical composition with the improvisation of jazz. And he called it the Third Stream. And he started a program that was going to allow people to be to allow students to study and creatively be motivated by the extended harmonies of classical music and all of the improvisatory aspects of jazz. So after years go by, and this program still exists, but it's changed names a few times. They changed the name to Contemporary Improvisation because eventually they realized nobody knows what Third Stream is. Right. It didn't really become a thing. It wasn't really a genre.
Sounded good in the 60s, but then
it's a thing, but it's this thing to these like really, really geeky Gunther Schuller music nerds. And so when I entered conservatory, I started in the Contemporary Improvisation program. I was the only fiddle player. There were all kinds of different instruments, all kinds of people interested in different genres and combining different genres. And the focus of the program was a lot more about developing your oral learning skills. So it was like about sharpening your ears and using that and studying music orally to really enhance and develop a personal style, which often included improvisation. And so I got to kind of pick and choose my teachers, which was super cool. And then I went to classes with all of these other music nerds that were excited about listening very deeply, learning music from as many people as they could, and improvising and developing a style that was all their own.
How cool.
Yeah. And it included, like, I got to I took some Indian music classes. I was in a klezmer ensemble. I did some classical music, but mostly pretty badly. And got to study with an amazing violinist named Mimi Rabson. But I also studied with other people that played other instruments, and they were just working on musicianship rather than technique. So probably my biggest influence at NEC was Hank Snetsky, who has nothing to do with the stringed instruments, but he's an amazing teacher, phenomenal musician. And we worked really, really hard on development of personal style and really, developing my ears so that I could, it's all about really finding your true voice, your true creative voice, and trying to figure out how to convey it as effectively as possible.
How amazing. What a great program.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. The world should know about this place. And a lot of students potential students could go and apply there. That's amazing. Did you find, in your time there, did you find any lifelong collaborators that you love to work with? Any members of your band, your touring band at all? Did they come from there, or was it from other experiences?
Well, that's a great question. I did meet people in college who I loved and collaborated with still to this day. But I think the bigger influence in terms of long-term collaborations was the fact that my school was in Boston. And that was a big part of why I chose this school. It was in a city. I was like, I'm broke. I need to keep working while I go to college. So I'm going to need to play gigs. So I needed to go to a city with lots of gigs. Right. And so I was in Boston, and Boston is a college town. There are so many schools there, so many colleges. And I had already developed these deep friendships with friends from different fiddle camps earlier in my, as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them ended up at music school at the same time as I did in Boston. So wow. I was like, I was living 4 blocks away from Berklee College of Music. There was a huge collection of fiddle students there. Also, there were folks that were interested in folk music who happened to be at other colleges. Like I had a good friend who was going to MIT. Another fiddle player was going to Harvard. Another fiddle player was like in med school, but just like came out to all the sessions. So Boston, in addition to being a great college town, also is a great traditional music town. So there were, in the late 90s, it was like sort of that river dance era, and Irish music was really hot. Everyone was like, ooh, Irish music, yay. And there was like at least one Irish music session every night somewhere in Boston. Wow. And I had friends who didn't go to college, but they just played. That was their job, is they played a different Irish session every night in Boston. And that was how they pieced together a living. So that scene, with all of those people getting to interact either in jam sessions or playing gigs together, or, doing little recording projects together, going to concerts together, festivals, like all of that was a huge influence on my music. And I am still in contact with many, many, many of those deep, dear friends from that time.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, like this weekend, I'm about to go to teach at a fiddle weekend. It's a weekend that was started and run by my friend Hanneke Castle, who's an amazing Scottish fiddle player who I was in a band with years ago, but we met at Alistair Fraser's camp, and then we went to college at the same time in Boston. She was at Berklee while I was at NEC, and like collaborated band-wise, played many gigs together, and still collaborating and influencing each other to this day. And there's so many friends like that through the folk music scene.
I'm going through it right now with my oldest son, where he's, thinking, should I go to post-secondary education, or should I just learn things on my own? And yes, you can learn things on your own. You can totally, do that. But my argument is that when you go to school, you meet all these other people. You can learn different ways of approaching the same thing that you're doing, all together, that you all come at from a slightly different angle, and you can immerse yourself into a much more enriching environment. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like if you wanted to be a great tennis player, you wouldn't go to a brick wall and play tennis against the brick wall for your life. Like you can only get so good at doing that. And eventually, how the ball is going to bounce back at you. Whereas if you go to school, it's kind of like suddenly the brick wall is gone and you're on the tennis court and there's somebody else on the other side that's also playing tennis, but they've learned it in a slightly different way than you have. And you can see their moves and you can see what they're doing and you think, that's really cool. I love what they did and I'm going to try to adopt some of that. I'm going to learn from that. And not only that, but when you're done the tennis game, you both shake hands and then you leave and then you both talk about each other to your contacts.
Yeah.
And you say, I just had a great game with this person. You got to check them out. And it's just like, that's how you build up your network. That's how you learn different styles and really just like become so much better at it than just staying at home and doing it by yourself. So I'm so happy that you had so many experiences that you had where you finally found your tribe. You found your people that, you know, growing up in a small town, you're playing fiddle. Not too many kids are doing that. And you feel like I'm the only one. I was the same way songwriting. I was the only one that was into writing songs at the age of 8 and going forward. And then finally, when I went to my first songwriting camp and met other people, I was like, my God, I can't believe this. There's people that understand me that
totally
know what it's like. Yeah, I know. It's so crazy.
So awesome. Yeah, we're lucky people to get these experiences. It's great.
Absolutely. But also, like, thank goodness for the people that run those programs. For people like us that, you know, like, here's a specialized thing. It's very specialized, really, because how many kids on average are playing fiddle? Not that many, but here's a program where you can all come together and realize that you're not alone and you know, just like spend a week enjoying everybody doing the same thing and all having the same love for all of that. It's just, yeah, it's incredible.
I read this article a few months ago in the New York Times about how loneliness is an epidemic worldwide and it actually affects health outcomes like significantly, as much as like diabetes does or something. It's like it's a huge health factor. Or maybe they compared it to like smoking so many packs of cigarettes for your whole life or whatever.
Sure.
Loneliness is a big deal, and there's some countries that are noticing it in their population. So they've appointed people in charge of like loneliness. There's like a loneliness bureau of someone who goes out and makes sure that there are programs and events and things that bring people together and create community. Yeah. And of course, I read this article and I immediately thought, music, art, like oh my gosh, like we tend in our, at least culturally, I find that often music is undersold. It's like, I find it to be a life-giving, necessary element of the world, but you know, people don't always equate it with like healthcare. Whereas I read this article and I was like, oh, this is so important. And every single person who's organizing a festival or teaching lessons or organizing a camp or some kind of a community building, arts oriented, like it brings people together. It's so crucial and so important. And you're right. Those connections they're life-giving.
Well, music and all art really is such a powerful thing. It's the first thing that gets eliminated whenever there's budget cuts. And yet it's just such a powerful thing. Try to live a day without the arts. Try to live a day without hearing a piece of music or listening to the radio or observing some art or watching a TV show or watching a film or reading a book or, you know, all that stuff. And it's the more that you can bring people together into the arts, the more of an enriching experience it is for everyone. And that's how real connections are made. I've been to so many different music camps, songwriting camps. Speaking about loneliness, my wife and I, we just went to Newfoundland in November and ran a single day songwriting course that was held in this tiny remote town. Anyways, all these people from the area came together for this. And they're all within a vicinity of maybe like 100 kilometers radius, you know, something like that. None of them knew each other.
Oh my gosh.
None of them knew, speaking about loneliness, and they all thought I'm alone and nobody understands what it is that I'm doing. And then they all came together. They all met. We taught them in the morning about songwriting and you know, what we do and what we look for in hit songwriting and things like that. And then we broke them down into groups for the afternoon, all random groups, where they all got to meet in groups of 3, shake hands and make a song baby together. And we created like such a bond in one single day with all these people. And they're still going forward and co-writing now that they realize that they all are within this little 100-kilometer radius. And it's just, it's incredible seeing the power of the change.
That is really gorgeous.
And I love that you're sharing your music with the world. I love that you're putting out album after album. That's amazing. But you do so much more than that. You just mentioned teaching, and then that must be a big part of what you do as well. You're writing, you're performing, you're teaching around the world. I would just love to know how you find the time to even eat or sleep. How do you keep this machine going where it's just like constantly pumping out albums, finding time for teaching, finding time for performing, all of that? You must have such a crazy busy schedule, I would imagine.
I have in the past. I'm a recovering workaholic, and clearly things have slowed down significantly for me on purpose in the last few years. And I appreciate that. Becoming a parent really forced that on me, and I'm really grateful for it. So,
not just a parent, but a foster parent and an adoptive parent. That is awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And that's a significant time. It's, it's your new life. You become a parent, especially an adoptive parent with, somebody, if you're parenting somebody with special needs or trauma of any kind, it's a full-time job. So I work a lot, but I have consciously been very careful about pulling back in the last few years. And that's been really, really great. It's so important, both creatively. Like I've gotten so much deeper into my own creativity in new ways that I probably wouldn't have if I was still out like touring, whatever I did in my 20s. I think I was touring like 250 plus days a year. And that is definitely not the case anymore. So over time, things have kind of shifted and morphed depending on what my needs were or my lifestyle needs were as I've gotten older. So I used to tour all the time. I did tons of folk clubs, tons of folk fiddle festivals, lots of camps. There was a period of time where every summer I would teach 8 weeks of camp in a row.
Wow.
So like the whole summer, basically I would be at a different camp, teaching lots and lots and lots of workshops, festivals. And then, that wore me out. Right. So that was too much after a while. And I joined a band. When I first became a parent, one of the ways that I kind of stepped back was I joined a band so we could collaborate and teamwork on the business aspect of things. Mm-hmm. So that was great. My bandmate was doing more of the booking and management, and I could just parent and then show up on the weekends and play, which was a wonderful life transition for me. That felt like taking a step back, even though I was still touring. It was like I was touring with other parents who understood that I only wanted to be gone for really mostly just long weekends and come back in time for school. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then over time, I've also started to rely more on teaching. And so I have a private studio here in Vermont, and I do lessons on Zoom. I go out and I do lots of workshops. I have a Patreon community, and a really big thing the last few years is, in addition to releasing albums to like my mailing list and my fan base, I also have been creating teaching content online. So I have a video course on how to learn by ear. It's really geared towards beginning musicians and really beginning people just entering the traditional music world who maybe they've been playing music for a while already, but they're used to learning music from the written page. And so I have a whole video series and a bunch of teaching resources on my website. And that's been one of the ways that I've kind of started creating more content from a home base so that I can still be here for my son, who, as it turns out, doesn't like touring.
Yes.
I was always thought, like, as a kid, I was like, oh, my parents are so boring. They never go anywhere. I want to go on tour. I'm ready to like travel the world. And my parents don't love to do that. But I really love touring. I love traveling to this day. And I thought, oh, when I'm a parent, I'm going to be this cool parent and we're going to go on tour and my kid's going to love it. They're going to go to all these cool gigs and festivals. It's going to be great. Turns out, my kid, not so much of a traveler.
I know.
I didn't realize until I had a kid that like, oh, they have opinions too.
Yeah.
They have their own ideas about the world.
I love that thing that says parents are the bow and children are the arrow, and you can point them in the direction where you want them to go, but where they land is completely up to them.
And then what happens after that too, right? Like that's their own life, their own thing.
Yeah, because like it could land exactly where you want it to be, and maybe they'll really love it, or it could end up slightly off to the side, or it could go completely 180 and go the other way.
Yeah.
They are their own unique individual, and where they want to go and the path that they want to take. And my dad was a United Church minister, and my grandfather was a United Church minister. And whenever my brother and I would go to church, all these old ladies would be like, so are you going to follow your dad's footsteps and be a minister? And I was like, no, not quite.
Yep.
But it's interesting. In a way, I feel like I sort of have that element to my career, because in the songs that I write, in the content that I create, I try my best to do positive messages within those songs. You know, songs that help people or make them feel like they're not alone, or everything's going to be all right. You know, I try to put those sort of same feelings that would be in a sermon into the songs, so like songs of service, basically. Not that I'm creating religious songs, but songs of service, songs that actually go out and help people. So it's interesting. I feel like in a way it is kind of ministry in some sort of way.
I totally see the connection. 100%. Absolutely. I mean, you're not the only child of a minister. I mean, James Brown's father was a preacher, and totally. That's a huge influence on James Brown's music. And then therefore, like all music after James Brown is influenced by his preacher father. Yeah.
Aretha Franklin, I think, as well is a preacher's kid. There's tons and tons. I know a real sort of like, going to church every single Sunday and hearing all that music just has an effect on a lot of kids, especially when you're given an opportunity where you can go up and perform in front of a congregation every Sunday without any judgment is pretty cool. They're just happy that anyone's up there performing musically at all, and nobody says, oh, that performance was terrible or that performance was amazing. They just accept it for the way it is. And then you get to see, oh, music is actually kind of a fun thing. I can get up there and do that, until you get out into the real world and somebody boos after your performance or something like that.
Oh no.
Oh, I want, this is why I don't do live performance. I've had a couple of horrible experiences as a teenager where I was in a band and we finished this one song and there was no clapping from a full house. And somebody from the back said, please stop putting us to sleep. But I laugh so hard about that now.
That's so awful.
My best story, though, of live performance is I was in a band when I was in my early 20s, and we played at a sports bar. They booked us at a sports bar, and this really important hockey game was on that night. And we were on stage, and behind the stage was a projection screen. And the projector was in front of us, so it was beaming on us, the projection, and our shadows were going onto the projection of the hockey game. But if you sat in the right spot in the bar, we would blend in with the TV screen behind. And so all these people were just sitting in this one row, basically, so that they could watch the game and no clapping afterwards. But it was that point that I was like, maybe the live thing is really not for me. It's more sitting behind the scenes and creating content.
Yep. I have played that gig. I'm for better or for worse. Right.
Yeah. Yep. It's hard to compete against the sports game. That's for sure. Yep. But it is interesting, though, as time goes on, your direction sort of changes a little bit, and giving back is really something that I think is something that happens to a lot of us, where we start going out into the world. We're going to conquer the world. We're going to tour. We're going to go out and do all these dates. We're going to release all these albums where, it's like very much just like building your career. And it's a very natural thing for you in your 20s and in your 30s. And then when you get into your 40s, it's like, actually, there's a lot more to this. And I'm tired. And I also, tired. Yeah. I love being in the same bed every night, which is great. Yeah. But also like, you realize there's all these other people that are coming up right now that don't know how to go from point A to point B. And I have experience, you have experience in this world. Maybe there's something in this brain that we could share that helps our fellow human being get from point A to point B a little bit faster. you know, and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that we experienced or anything like that. And I think it's a great thing. It's fun. It's exciting. Not that we stop completely doing the creative aspect of it, but it's definitely the teaching and the sharing and the giving back starts to elevate more in our lives as we get older, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. It's really I feel like it really enriches my life quite a lot.
It does. And also, you know, there's a lot of people that ask me, how do I get rid of writer's block? And I find that writer's block happens a lot when you are working too hard. And when you unplug and start going for a walk in the woods.
That's exactly what I tell everybody. Go sit by a river for a little while to come right back.
You'll get 10 ideas by that river. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like there is an aspect of emotional stress too. Like it's either physical or like if too much work or too much emotional labor, that'll block you up. No problem.
For sure.
Just like that. But once you are, you know, in a healthy place, healthier with your balance, emotional work balance, and
also having conversations with people and leaving the music behind and living life and asking people questions, being curious about things and hearing stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm inspired to write music by all of the people around me are like my biggest influences. Absolutely. The people you meet, the stories you hear, every song has a little piece of all of my friends in it, you know?
Of course. A good friend of mine has this thing that she says, I'm sorry, I'm not eavesdropping. I'm songwriting.
Yes.
It's so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So good. Okay. So do you plan out your year sort of like, do you figure out during this time, I'd like to make a new record. During this time, I'd like to do some weekend performances. During this time, I'd like to devote to teaching. Or is it sort of like all mixed throughout the year that you're sort of watering the garden at all times of the year?
Boy, it's a little bit of both, honestly. Like I like to plan things, and certainly something like an album release does have to be planned well in advance. Or if you're going to tour it at any, you know, if you're going to do any live shows, like you gotta know that, you know, 6 to 12 months and kind of get the gears going. However, I've also just in my life as a parent, I've also discovered that sometimes you make a plan and then something else happens totally different.
Yep.
So there have been a lot of life challenges that I've had to kind of just accommodate and roll with over the years. That means that sometimes I look back and at my plan from a year ago and I laugh at it. I'm just like, what was I thinking? That didn't happen.
Life finds a way.
That was a nice idea, but you know, it turns out actually this other stuff had to happen instead. And I really value family, and I value being present with the people that I love. And that is pretty much always my priority. So, so like, you know, last year I released a new album. I was really glad, and it was important. It felt like great music to get out there in an important time to do it. But also, you know, after the release dust settled, you know, my son was having a really rough year in school, and I focused on that for a long time too. So there's ebbs and flows, you know?
Yeah. And when you release an album, are you involved in every single aspect of it? Are you producing the album? Are you doing the artwork? Are you mixing, mastering, publicity, promotion? Do you have different people that wear different hats for you, or are you wearing every single hat?
Like a little of each. I kind of am the puppeteer, so I love to hire different people to collaborate with. I love having a producer. I do most of the writing and repertoire selection myself, and then I'll work with a producer to figure out which other musicians are going to be on the project. And then I often hire, I'll hire people to do the arts part, the graphic design and the visual part of it. I'll hire somebody to do publicity if I can. But then I've always released albums on my own label. So I have a lot of say in all of those things. Like I get to decide who I'm hiring to do those different things. And that's been also a conscious choice. Like I had times in my life when I was talking to record labels and the offers were, I could tell immediately that they were going to inhibit my ability to be present for my family. And, like I would talk to a record label and they'd be like, we really need you to be out touring, X number of dates a year. And we really need this, and this. And I need to, I really, family is important to me and I need to prioritize that. And luckily, as a self-employed musician, I can kind of, to a certain extent, I can kind of curate my work so that it helps support my life rather than detract from it. And my life is my work is so important to my being. Like creativity is an essential part of my life, but I'm grateful that I'm able to massage the schedule if needed. So so I do a lot, but I don't do everything. And I love to hire collaborators, especially producers. I love working with producers and actually songwriting collaborators too. Like that's been a really cool thing to have in my life.
Yeah, it's great to throw the idea against the wall, and see how it bounces back to you and see if it works or if it makes sense to the person that you're collaborating with. And it's good to find somebody that really loves what it is that you do and you love what they do. And then it's just a win-win situation.
Yeah. Well, and because I'm a social person, I'm socially motivated. I really like the accountability piece. So if I have a songwriting collaborator or a producer that I'm working with, or even other bandmates, I like the accountability of having somebody else say either, hey, did you get to that thing yet? Or like it's a back and forth, give and take conversation ongoing. And it's really great, especially if you're making an album that's going to be out there forever. It's nice to have somebody checking your work, somebody checking all the T's and I's and dotting all that, like just being like, okay, let's make sure that let's get this ship shape, make sure it's all, because everyone in the process, it's exhausting and people get tired.
Yep. Oh, for sure. For sure. Just curious, creatively on your records, have you ever experimented with slightly outside the box traditional music? Have you ever involved any sort of electronic music, for example, with what it is that you do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So my range at the moment, so I've gone from like really traditional, like old songs that were like hundreds of years old and they're more like storytelling ballads. And then I've gone to, so like my more, I don't know, contemporary albums, like the album that I released that's inspired by foster and adoptive families. That's a little bit more in like the indie rock, indie folk realm. So, drums, electric guitars, a lot of synth stuff. Cool. And I love the musicians that I love have continued to experiment and grow creatively over their careers. Joni Mitchell is a great example, favorite Canadian songwriter.
Yes.
Who, started out in one genre and completely morphed to a totally other genre by, after decades of work as a musician. And I love that. It's so great to keep learning. And I listen to everything. I really listen. I don't have a favorite genre. And so the things that I'm listening to are always influencing me. And that's been certainly the case, I'd say, in the last couple of years with songwriting. I'm excited to like dismantle a pop song and kind of take it apart. How does it work? What's the format? Like, how does the production work? How is it recorded and how is it written? And all of that stuff is really interesting to me. I love to geek out about it.
Me too. I love all music. How can you not? You know, I remember being very opinionated back in the day about music until somebody sat me down and said, listen, try and find at least one good thing about every piece of music that you listen to. And if you do that enough, and it might just be, I really like the sound of the drums, or I really like that backing vocal, or I like that bridge, or whatever, then eventually you will start to really enjoy all styles of music and you'll find the beauty in it. And it worked. And I recommend that for everybody to just don't be opinionated, just try and find the joy and beauty in it. And also try to make it yourself in order to understand the complexity of it all and how hard it is to make a rap song. How hard it is to make any type of music that's out there. As frivolous as you think it is, as easy as you think it looks, just really try to do it yourself. And then you'll really appreciate all the hard work that goes in to making a very successful 3.5 minute song that connects with everybody around the world. Good luck. It's hard.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a fascinating art form. I never get tired of thinking about it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for answering all those questions. That were very, very fascinating for me, and a world that I don't know a lot about. But it's just I feel like I know quite a bit more right now, and I appreciate all those answers. Lissa, I'm wondering if you could do this for me. I usually end the podcast with some words of advice for the next generation of people that are coming up, females that are coming up, those that identify as female, somebody who would love to be the next Lissa Schneckenburger. What does it take to be you? What does it take to succeed in your realm, in all that you do?
I have a few thoughts, a number of bits of advice are coming to mind, and I'm just thinking about how to curate them because there's so many things. I'd say probably the number one piece, maybe a tag team piece of advice, which is be fearless, but don't be dumb. So in other words, there are a lot of times as a woman, as a female identifying person in the music industry, there are many times. I mean, this is true of all life, actually, not just music, but there are many times when you show up in a space that is male dominated, and it requires that you be fearless, and you have to sort of psych yourself up because culturally, most of the time, women are not culturally supported in being outspoken or being fearless in that kind of environment. And so that's kind of the first piece of advice, is to just like forget whatever, forget about being nice, that's a real culturally female thing. Like, I want everybody to like me. I'm going to help people. I'm going to offer to do this for them and offer to do that for them. Like, don't worry about that. Just let your ideas come out. Don't be afraid of it. And also, if something is not feeling safe, pay attention. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're in a male dominated space and it doesn't feel good, get out. Like, it is totally okay to like protect yourself and prioritize your own needs, and don't go places that don't feel good. Yeah. So that's kind of an important, they go together.
Absolutely.
And then something I tell literally everybody, all artists of any gender, is to learn about the business. Like, people get into music because they're creatively inspired. They love the music. But if you want to do it for a job, the business part is equally, if not even more important sometimes, because we live in a capitalist world, and because money is a legitimate thing that everyone needs to live and have healthy, happy lives. It's just a reality. The business aspect of music is a really essential one that doesn't get talked about very often. And most people get interested in becoming musicians because they're passionate about music. They love music, and that is wonderful. And I want everyone to follow their passion, but then if they intend to also do it for work, they have to think about the business part of it. Or not. They could do something else for money and still be passionate about music. But it's an important piece that I wasn't aware of for a long time as a young person.
I think it's a great idea to know as much business as you can. It is the music business. And if you're getting into the music business, it is good to know your music and your business. It's not, in my opinion, I think it's okay if you are in a position where you can hire somebody who is a little bit more well-versed in a certain area of business than you are. Yeah. For example, I have an entertainment lawyer. I have an entertainment accountant that helped me out greatly because I'm not great at contracts or accounting. But it's just, you can do certain things like that, but it's just as much business and how the business works and how does this report to this and how does the whole process of releasing a record, touring, managing all these different things. If you can be doing as much of that as you can, the more the power that you can put into your own hands, the better off you'll be, rather than someone dictating what it is that you're going to be doing that you might not agree with or feel safe about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a deep industry. There are so many aspects. It is complicated and it requires some pretty intensive study if you want to do it for real and you want to get good at it. Yeah, there's a lot to learn, both on the creative side and the business side. So yeah. I'm lucky. I'm interested in both, and I find both really stimulating and interesting. But not everybody does. And it's good to know, good to know yourself and figure out.
Again, I think as you get older, the more this becomes interesting. I think anybody who's 16 or 17 is just thinking about, I just want to perform for the people. I just want to get on stage and I want to, reach as many people as I can. But then the further you go on in life, you realize the business part is so important as well. And if only we could reach out to those that are 16 to 17 and just let them know, you got to be thinking about this stuff too. Yeah. In the same way that, like, it's so funny how they teach things like, trigonometry in school, but they don't really teach you how to do your taxes in school. Just things like that is just like, prepare yourself for what's about to come.
Life skills. Yep.
Life skills. Absolutely. Lissa, how can people find you? What is your website address?
Great question. It's lissafiddle.com because, people are overwhelmed by my last name, Schneckenburger. And it's completely phonetic. You can Google my last name and you'll be fine. But if you want to just go straight to the source, it's Lissa Fiddle, LissaFiddle.com. And there I have so many different things. I've got the little, some educational pieces, everything from what's the difference between a fiddle and a violin to how do I, to video courses on how to learn by ear better, how to study and get better at the things that you're not naturally good at. I have some free resources for beginning musicians. Like I have like a 5-day practice challenge, which people can sign up for totally for free. And it's got lots and lots of helpful, motivational teaching music bits that like all of my experience as a teacher over the last decades are kind of like in those little free nuggets. So, and all my albums, lots of music to be found at lissafiddle.com, and video,
tour information, all of that.
Yep. Dates, teaching stuff, all of it. Yeah. I'm obsessed. I love recording music and I also love music videos. So there's a whole, I love it when people go looking for the videos too, because that's like such a fun combination of mediums. So all my favorite things at lissafiddle.com.
That's amazing. And then people can find you on Apple Music and Spotify as well under Lissa Schneckenburger.
Either Lissa Schneckenburger or Lissa Fiddle. You can look for either. Both will come up. If you would like to challenge yourself and spell Schneckenburger, I love that. You do it.
Sure.
And also, I'm on all the social medias. Usually it's Lissa Fiddle and all the streaming platforms. And you can go find my stuff, whether you're excited about folk music, songwriting, fiddle music, or even all of the foster adoptive families out there. I actually give out free albums. I have a program where people can either donate to the program or receive an album if you are affected by foster care or adoption.
Amazing.
So message me about that, and all of that stuff on my website.
Thank you for all that you are doing in the world, giving back, being a foster parent, being an adoptive parent, making music that really matters, that inspires people. Thank you for being on this podcast as well. Thank you for spending some time with me. I've really, really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to do a deep dive into your music. I hope you come and tour Canada at some point.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
I'd love to see you perform up here, or maybe I can come down to the New England area and see one of your performances at some point. That would be great. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Lissa. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye. Stay tuned for the next episode of Women in the Music Industry, coming soon. Let's embark on this incredible journey together, celebrating the women who are reshaping the music business one note at a time. If you enjoyed hearing this podcast, please take a moment and give it a like, a rating, or a follow. Your support helps immensely. We'll see you next time.